Guinea-Bissau, officially the Republic of Guinea-Bissau /E°C/nee-bi-SOW GI-nee-bi-SOW is a country in West Africa. It is bordered by Senegal to the north and Guinea to the south and east, with the Atlantic Ocean to its west. It covers 36,125 km² with an estimated population of 1,600,000. Guinea-Bissau was once part of the Kingdom of Gabu, as well as part of the Mali Empire. Parts of this kingdom persisted until the 18th century, while a few others were under some rule by the Portuguese Empire since the 16th century. In the 19th century, it was colonized as Portuguese Guinea. Upon independence, declared in 1973 and recognized in 1974, the name of its capital, Bissau, was added to the country's name to prevent confusion with Guinea. Guinea-Bissau has a history of political instability since independence, and no elected president has successfully served a full 5-year term. On the evening of April 12, 2012, members of the country's military staged a coup d'état and arrested the interim president and a leading presidential candidate. Former Vice Chief of Staff, General Mamadou Nkrumah, assumed control of the country in the transitional period and started negotiations with opposition parties. Only 14% of the population speaks Portuguese, established as the official language in the colonial period. A plurality of the population speaks Crioulo, a Portuguese-based Creole language, and the remainder speak a variety of native African languages. The main religions are African traditional religions and Islam. There is a Christian minority. The country's per capita gross domestic product is one of the lowest in the world. Guinea-Bissau is a member of the African Union, Economic Community of West African States, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Latin Union, Community of Portuguese-language countries, La Francophonie and the South Atlantic Peace and Cooperation Zone. History. Guinea-Bissau was once part of the Kingdom of Gabu, part of the Mali Empire. Parts of this kingdom persisted until the 18th century. Other parts of the territory in the current country were considered by the Portuguese as part of their empire. Portuguese Guinea was known as the Slave Coast, as it was a major area for the exportation of African slaves by Europeans to the Western Hemisphere. Previously slaves had been traded by Arabs north to the northern part of Africa and into the Middle East. Early reports of Europeans reaching this area include those of the Venetian Alvise Cadamosto's voyage of 1455, the 1479–1480 voyage by Flemish-French trader Eustache de la Fosse, and Diogo Carpão. In the 1480s this Portuguese explorer reached the Congo River and the lands of Bay Congo, setting up the foundations of modern Angola, some 4,200 km down the African coast from Guinea-Bissau. Although the rivers and coast of this area were among the first places colonized by the Portuguese, who set up trading posts in the 16th century, they did not explore the interior until the 19th century. The local African rulers in Guinea, some of whom prospered greatly from the slave trade, controlled the inland trade and did not allow the Europeans into the interior. They kept them in the fortified coastal settlements where the trading took place. African communities that fought back against slave traders also distrusted European adventurers and would-be settlers. The Portuguese in Guinea were largely restricted to the port of Biçaw and Cashew. Some few, independent European farmer settlers established isolated farms along Biçaw's inland rivers. For a brief period in the 1790s, the British tried to establish a rival foothold on an offshore island, at Balama. But by the 19th century the Portuguese were sufficiently secure in Biçaw to regard the neighbouring coastline as their own special territory, also up north in part of present South Senegal. An armed rebellion beginning in 1956 by the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde under the leadership of Arma Lcar Cabral gradually consolidated its hold on then Portuguese Guinea. Unlike guerrilla movements in other Portuguese colonies, the PAIGC rapidly extended its military control over large portions of the territory. Aided by the jungle-like terrain, its easily reached borderlines with neighboring allies, and large quantities of arms from Cuba, China, the Soviet Union, and left-leaning African countries. Cuba also agreed to supply artillery experts, doctors, and technicians. the PAIGC even managed to acquire a significant anti-aircraft capability in order to defend itself against aerial attack. By 1973, the PAIGC was in control of many parts of Guinea, although the movement suffered a setback in January 1973 when Cabral was assassinated. Independence. Independence was unilaterally declared on September 24, 1973. Recognition became universal following the 25 April 1974 socialist-inspired military coup in Portugal, which overthrew Lisbon's Estado Novo regime. Luís Cabral, brother of Arma LCAR and co-founder of PAIGC, was appointed the first president of Guinea-Bissau. Following independence, the PAIGC killed thousands of local Guinean soldiers who had fought along with a Portuguese army against guerrillas. Some escaped to settle in Portugal or other African nations. One of the massacres occurred in the town of bɪʻsaʊ. In 1980 the PAIGC acknowledged in its newspaper Na Cubed Pincher that many Guinean soldiers had been executed and buried in unmarked collective graves in the woods of Cumara, Portugal, and Mansba. The country was controlled by a revolutionary council until 1984. The first multi-party elections were held in 1994. An army uprising in May 1998 led to the Guinea-Bissau Civil War and the president's ousting in June 1999. Elections were held again in 2000, and Kumba Ayala was elected president. In September 2003, a military coup was conducted. The military arrested Ayala on the charge of being unable to solve the problems. After being delayed several times, legislative elections were held in March 2004. A mutiny of military factions in October 2004 resulted in the death of the head of the armed forces and caused widespread unrest. Vieira years. In June 2005, presidential elections were held for the first time since the coup that deposed Ayala. Ayala returned as the candidate for the PRS, claiming to be the legitimate president of the country, but the election was won by former President João Bernardo Vieira, deposed in the 1999 coup. Vieira beat Malembukai Sana in a runoff election. Sana initially refused to concede, claiming that tampering and electoral fraud occurred in two constituencies including the capital, Bißau. Despite reports of arms entering the country prior to the election and some disturbances during campaigning, including attacks on government offices by unidentified gunmen, foreign election monitors described the 2005 election overall as calm and organized. 3 years later, PAIGC won a strong parliamentary majority, with 67 of 100 seats, in the parliamentary election held in November 2008. In November 2008, President Vieira's official residence was attacked by members of the armed forces, killing a guard but leaving the president unharmed. On March 2, 2009, however, Vieira was assassinated by what preliminary reports indicated to be a group of soldiers avenging the death of the head of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Batista Tagmai. Tagm died in an explosion on Sunday 1 March 2009, target of an assassination. Military leaders in the country pledged to respect the constitutional order of succession. National Assembly Speaker Raimundo Pereira was appointed as an interim president until a nationwide election on June 28, 2009. It was won by Malembukai Sana politics. Guinea-Bissau is a republic. In the past, the government had been highly centralized. Multi-party governance was not established until mid-1991. The president is the head of state and the prime minister is the head of government. At the legislative level, a unicameral Assembly Nacional Popular is made up of 100 members. They are popularly elected from multi-member constituencies to serve a 4-year term. The judicial system is headed by a Tribunal Supremo da Justiça Section A, made up of 9 justices appointed by the president. They serve at the pleasure of the president. João Bernardo Nino Vieira was elected in 2005 as president of Guinea-Bissau as an independent, being declared winner of the second round by the CNE. Vieira returned to power in 2005, 6 years after being ousted from office during a civil war. Previously, he held power for 19 years after taking power in 1980 in a bloodless coup. In that action, he toppled the government of Luís Cabral. He was killed on March 2, 2009, possibly by soldiers in retaliation for the assassination of General Batista Tagnawe, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, killed in an explosion. Vieira's death did not trigger widespread violence, but there were signs of turmoil in the country, according to the advocacy group Swiss Peace. Malambaka Sanneh was elected after a transition. In the 2009 election to replace the assassinated Vieira, Sanneh was the presidential candidate of the PAIGC while Kumba Ayala was the presidential candidate of the PRS. In 2012, President Rachid Sambu Balda Malambaka Sanneh died. He belonged to PAIGC, one of the two major political parties in Guinea-Bissau, along with the PRS. There are more than 20 minor parties. Regions and sectors. Guinea-Bissau is divided into 8 regions and 1 autonomous sector. These, in turn, are subdivided into 37 sectors. The regions are: Geography. Guinea-Bissau lies mostly between latitudes 11° and 13° N, and longitudes 13° and 17° W. At 36,125 square kilometers, the country is larger in size than Taiwan or Belgium. This small tropical country lies at a low altitude. Its highest point is 300 meters. The interior is savanna, and the coastline is plain with swamps of Gwinean mangroves. Its monsoon-like rainy season alternates with periods of hot, dry harmattan winds blowing from the Sahara. The bɪ'saʊ's archipelago extends out to sea. Major cities. Main cities in Guinea-Bissau include: Climate. Guinea-Bissau is warm all year around and there is little temperature fluctuation. It averages 26.3 degrees Celsius. The average rainfall for Bissau is 2,024 mm, although this is almost entirely accounted for during the rainy season, which falls between June and September-October. From December through April, the country experiences drought. Economy. Guinea-Bissau's GDP per capita is one of the lowest in the world, and its Human Development Index is one of the lowest on Earth. More than 2/3 of the population lives below the poverty line. The economy depends mainly on agriculture. Fish, cashew nuts and ground nuts are its major exports. A long period of political instability has resulted in depressed economic activity, deteriorating social conditions, and increased macroeconomic imbalances. It takes longer on average to register a new business in Guinea-Bissau than in any other country in the world except Suriname. The Economist, Pocket World in Figures, 2008 edition, London, Profile Books. Guinea-Bissau has started to show some economic advances after a pact of stability was signed by the main political parties of the country, leading to an IMF-backed structural reform program. The key challenges for the country in the period ahead are to achieve fiscal discipline, rebuild public administration, improve the economic climate for private investment, and promote economic diversification. After the country became independent from Portugal in 1974 due to the Portuguese colonial war and the Carnation Revolution, the rapid exodus of the Portuguese civilian, military, and political authorities resulted in considerable damage to the country's economic infrastructure, social order, and standard of living. After several years of economic downturn and political instability, in 1997, Guinea-Bissau entered the CFA franc monetary system, bringing about some internal monetary stability. The civil war that took place in 1998 and 1999, and a military coup in September 2003 again disrupted economic activity, leaving a substantial part of the economic and social infrastructure in ruins and intensifying the already widespread poverty. Following the parliamentary elections in March 2004 and presidential elections in July 2005, the country is trying to recover from the long period of instability, despite a still fragile political situation. Beginning around 2005, drug traffickers based in Latin America began to use Guinea-Bissau, along with several neighboring West African nations, as a transshipment point to Europe for cocaine. The nation was described by a United Nations official as being at risk for becoming a narco-state. The government and the military have done little to stop drug trafficking, which increased after the 2012 coup d'état copyright. Guinea-Bissau is a member of the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law in Africa. Demographics. Ethnic groups. The population of Guinea-Bissau is ethnically diverse and has many distinct languages, customs, and social structures. Guinea-Bissauans can be divided into the following ethnic groups: Fula and the Mandinka-speaking people, who comprise the largest portion of the population and are concentrated in the north and northeast. Balanta and Papal people, who live in the southern coastal regions. And Manjako and Mankana, who occupy the central and northern coastal areas. Most of the remainder are Mestier Section Os of mixed Portuguese and African descent, including a Cape Verdean minority. Portuguese natives comprise a very small percentage of Guinea-Bissauans. After Guinea-Bissau gained independence, most of the Portuguese nationals left the country. The country has a tiny Chinese population. These include traders and merchants of mixed Portuguese and Chinese ancestry from Macau, a former Asian Portuguese colony. Language. Only 14% of the population speaks the official language of Portuguese, made the language of government and national communication during the colonial years. 44% speak Creole, a Portuguese-based Creole language, which is effectively a national language of communication among groups. The remainder speak a variety of native African languages unique to ethnicities. Most Portuguese and Mestier Section Os speak one of the African languages and Creole as second languages. French is taught in schools, as well, because the country is surrounded by French-speaking nations. And it is a full member of the Francophonie. Religion. Throughout the 20th century, most Bissau Guineans practice some form of animism. In the early 21st century, many have adopted Islam, which is now practiced by 50% of the country's population. Most of Guinea-Bissau's Muslims are of the Sunni denomination, with approximately 2% belonging to the Ahmadiyya sect. Approximately 10% of the country's population belong to the Christian community, and 40% continue to hold indigenous beliefs. These statistics can be misleading, however, as many residents practice syncretic forms of Islamic and Christian faiths, combining their practices with traditional African beliefs. Health. The WHO estimates there are fewer than 5 physicians per 100,000 persons in the country, down from 12 per 100,000 in 2007. The prevalence of HIV infection among the adult population is 1.8%. 20% of infected pregnant women receive antiretroviral coverage to prevent transmission to newborns. Malaria kills more residents. 9% of the population have reported infection. It causes 3 times as many deaths as AIDS. Life expectancy at birth has climbed since 1990, but remains short. The WHO's estimate of life expectancy for a child born in 2008 was 49 years. Despite lowering rates in surrounding countries, cholera rates were reported in November 2012 to be on the rise, with 1,500 cases reported and 9 deaths. A 2008 cholera epidemic in Guinea-Bissau affected 14,222 people and killed 225. Maternal and child health care. In June 2011, the United Nations Population Fund released a report on the state of the world's midwifery. It contained new data on the midwifery workforce and policies relating to newborn and maternal mortality for 58 countries. The 2010 maternal mortality rate per 100,000 births for Guinea-Bissau is 1,000. This is compared with 804.3 in 2008 and 966 in 1990. The under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 births is 195, and the neonatal mortality as a percentage of under 5's mortality is 24. The aim of this report is to highlight ways in which the Millennium Development Goals can be achieved, particularly Goal 4 reduce child mortality and Goal 5 improve maternal death. In Guinea-Bissau the number of midwives per 1,000 live births is 3. 1 out of 18 pregnant women die as a result of pregnancy. Education. Education is compulsory from the age of 7 to 13. The enrollment of boys is higher than that of girls. Child labor is very common. A significant minority of the population are illiterate. On the other side, Guinea-Bissau has several secondary schools and a surprising number of universities, to which an institutionally autonomous faculty of law as well as a faculty of medicine have to be added. In 1998, the gross primary enrollment rate was 53.5%, with higher enrollment ratio for males compared to females. Since 2001, Guinea-Bissau has been recovering from the civil conflict of 1999, and later conflicts, which displaced one-third of the population, destroyed many schools, and prevented most young children from attending school for at least half a year. Culture. Music. The music of Guinea-Bissau is usually associated with the polyrhythmic ggɪnɛ genre, the country's primary musical export. However, civil unrest and other factors have combined over the years to keep ggɪnɛ, and other genres, out of mainstream audiences, even in generally syncretist African countries. The calabash is the primary musical instrument of Guinea-Bissau, and is used in extremely swift and rhythmically complex dance music. Lyrics are almost always in Guinea-Bissau Creole, a Portuguese-based Creole language, and are often humorous and topical, revolving around current events and controversies, especially AIDS. The word ggɪnɛ is sometimes used generically, to refer to any music of the country, although it most specifically refers to a unique style that fuses about 10 of the country's folk music traditions. Tina and tinga are other popular genres, while extant folk traditions include ceremonial music used in funerals, initiations and other rituals, as well as balanta briska and kasunda copyright, mandinga jambadon, and the kunda sound of the Bisagos Islands. Film. Flora Gomez is an internationally renowned film director. His most famous film is Nhā Fala. Gomez's Mortu Negor was the first fiction film and the second feature film ever made in Guinea-Bissau. At FESPACO 1989, Mortu Negor won the prestigious Uganda Prize. Mortu Negor is in Creole with English subtitles. In 1992, Gomez directed Adieu Azul de Yonta, which was screened in the Uncertain Regards section at the 1992 Cannes Film Festival. Gomez has also served on the boards of many Africa-centric film festivals. See also. References. This article incorporates a public domain material from websites or documents of the CIA World Factbook. Further reading. External links. Link collection related to Guinea-Bissau on balama.net. Country profile from BBC News. Guinea-Bissau entry at the World Factbook. Guinea-Bissau from UCB Libraries GovPubs. Guinea-Bissau at Encyclopaedia Britannica. Guinea-Bissau at DMOZ. Wikimedia Atlas of Guinea-Bissau. Key development forecasts for Guinea-Bissau from International Futures, Government, Official Website, Chief of State and Cabinet Members, Constitution of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Bissau, Prime Minister Unregistered trademark fate unknown after apparent military coup West Africa Portuguese American Journal, Guinea-Bissau holds first post-coup election. Trade, Guinea-Bissau 2005 Summary Trade Statistics, News Media, News Headline Links from allafrica.com, Tourism, Guinea-Bissau Travel Guide from Wikivoyage, Health, The State of the World's Midwifery Guinea-Bissau Country Profile, GIS Information, Master Thesis about the Developing Geographical Information for Guinea-Bissau.